Okay, welcome back to Chapter 3. We're going to follow up those solving systems of equations with solving word problems with systems of equations. And Bill is going to handle this one for you guys.
All right. Now, do not panic. The first kinds of word problems that Alex will give you are actually relatively easy. So let's start with these, and maybe I can build up some confidence in you. All right, so here we go. It says, find two numbers whose sum is 59 and whose difference is 21. The key words here are sum, which tells me to add, and difference, which tells me to subtract. All right, showing enormous creativity, I will call the two numbers x and y. And the first sentence tells me that the sum of these numbers, that is x plus y, is 59. And the difference of these two numbers, x minus y, is 21. Now, the worst of it is over. You've actually written down the two equations. Solving the actual equations will be relatively easy for these problems. In this case, notice Jerry's first comment in the previous video was that you check to see if you're going to add the two equations, will something disappear? Because if it does, you don't have to do anything else. And in this case, I notice I have a plus y and a minus y. If I add those will add to 0. So I'm just going to add these equations. X plus x is 2x. Plus y and minus y is 0. 59 plus 21, I think, is 80. So divide both sides by 2. This tells me x is 40. To figure out y, I go back to here. I know that 40 plus y should equal 59. And to get from 40 to 59, I think I would have to add 19. So I think the two numbers are 40 and 19. Let's check my answer really quick. Let's subtract them and make sure that I get 21. Yeah, sure enough, I do. All right, so that worked. The numbers are 40 and 19. Anything you need to add? Or is that
No,
so far,
if
so
you were a little behind on how he just solved that, again, go back to the previous video on how to solve systems. But this is the easiest one we can give you because there's a cancellation immediately.
Okay, so let's do another one like this. In this case, it says that two numbers, this time the sum is 38 and the difference is 14. All right, so I'm going to go directly to the equation. The sum, if I add the numbers together, I get 38. The difference is 14. If I subtract the numbers, I get 14. All right, so add x plus x is 2x. Plus y and negative y is 0. 38 and 14, I think, is 52. Finally, divide both sides by 2. X will come out to be 26. And again, this equation's easier because, at least for me, it's a little easier to work with addition. If x is 26, I know 26 plus y should equal 38. To get to 38, I would have to add 12 to 26. And I can always also check my answers now. 26 minus 12 is indeed 14. So this must be the right answer because it makes both equations true.
That's it.
Okay. All right, so let's go to some of the problems in Alex that are a little bit trickier.
These are probably why you're watching us.
Right. If you haven't watched any Hot Topics videos yet, there's a good chance this is the one that you're watching. All right, so let's just read it. In a family, there are two cars. In a given week, the first car gets an average of 20 miles per gallon. The second car gets 25 miles per gallon. The two cars combined drive a total of 1,300 miles in that week for a total gas consumption of 55 gallons. How many gallons were consumed by each of the cars during that week?
Now, first of all, if you're asking why, get that question out of your head. It's part of the course. And it's going to make you a better person when it's all said and done, because we fight this every time we teach.
That's right. One of the deep secrets of intermediate algebra is that the word problems don't really have much to do with reality. But the purpose of these word problems is really not to match reality. It's to give you some more practice in solving systems of equations. I promise you, if you go to higher level math, sooner or later you'll start reaching word problems that do actually connect to the real world. But all of us who teach the course realize these word problems are a bit artificial, but the reality is you just got to be able to solve them. So let's get it over with. I like to start these problems by looking at the end of the problem. The key thing I'm interested in here is that the two cars have a total gas consumption of 55 gallons. So if I call X the gas consumption for the first car, that's just gas consumption, sorry, it should be a C. And if I let Y be the gas consumption for the second car, then I know the gas consumption for the first car plus the gas consumption for the second car should equal a total of 55 gallons.
That's the toughest equation to find right there.
And this is the one we recommend that you find first,
Exactly.
I think. It makes it a little easier. Now let's go back to that other sentence. The first car gets 20 miles per gallon, so 20 miles per gallon times the first car's gas consumption. The second car gets 25 miles per gallon, so 25 miles per gallon times the second car's gas consumption. That gets you a total of 1,300 miles. Your job now is to solve for X and Y. And unlike the problems we did before, here something is not going to immediately cancel if we go ahead and add these. I'm going to go ahead and work with the X's. I have positive 20X here. I would really like to have negative 20X here. I can get negative 20X here as long as I multiply both sides of this equation by negative 20. I'm going to write it on both sides just to make it clear we have to multiply on both sides. All right, so let's come over here and let's go ahead and do that multiplication. Negative 20 times x is negative 20x. Negative 20 times positive y is negative 20y. 55 times negative 20, I'm going to do this in two steps. 55 times 2, I believe, is 110. So 55 times 20, I believe, is 1,100. And notice it's negative 20. So I think this is negative 1,100. Jerry, is that right? Okay, yes. Thank you. All right, and then the second equation I can just copy down now. This is 20x plus 25y equals 1,300. And now when I add, wonderful things will happen. Negative 20x and positive 20x is 0. 25 minus 20 is just 5y. 1,300 minus 1,100 is just 200. So divide both sides by 5, and it looks like y equals 40. Now, if you can find a car whose gas consumption is 40 miles per gallon, my advice is to buy that car. I don't know.
That's right. We're just solving for gallons. So
this is not the gas. This is how many gallons it uses per week. Jerry is right. That's right. Okay. All right. Bad math teacher. Bad math teacher. All right. The easiest equation to go back to for solving for x is to go back to here. This says that x plus y equals 55. So x plus 40 should equal 55. So to get from 40 to 55, I have to add 15. So here are the solutions. The first car uses 15 gallons per week. The second car uses 40 gallons per week. All right. Did I miss anything?
Not at all.
All right. Let's look at another one that is not about gas mileage in gallons, but works very similarly. All right. So this one says 2 rainstorms occurred in 1 week in a certain area. The first storm lasted 40 hours. The second storm lasted 25 hours for a total of 1,225 milliliters of rain. What was the rate of rainfall for each of the 2 storms if the sum of the 2 rates was 40 milliliters per hour? Again, this last sentence is what you want to start with. We're interested here in the rate of the rainfall. So we're going to let x be the rate for the first storm, and we're going to let y be the rate for the second storm. And we know the sum of these 2 rates, x plus y, is 40. The first storm lasted 40 hours, so 40 hours times the first storm's rate. The second storm lasted 25 hours, so 25 hours times the second storm's rate. That should give you a total amount of 1,225 milliliters of rain. Again, the worst of it's over. You now have the 2 equations. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. Again, I have a positive 40x here. If I had a negative 40x here, I'd be really happy because they'd add to 0. So I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by negative 40. Okay, if I do that, I'll continue over here. Negative 40 times x is negative 40x. Negative 40 times positive y is negative 40y equals 40 times negative 40 is negative 1600. Second equation I can just copy down. 40x plus 25y is 1,225. And now I can just add my equations. Negative 40x and positive 40x is 0. Here, negative 40 plus 25, I think, is negative 15y. And here, negative 1600 plus 1225, let's see, 5 and 5 is 10. I think this is negative 375. Is that right, Jerry?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to divide both sides by negative 15, since this one is not so easy to do in your head. Again, we're doing this up here without a calculator because calculator, we left it in Jerry's office. But again, all of you have calculators. So when you're doing these word problems, again, just do the calculations on the calculator. I believe y will come out to be 25 here because I think 15 times 25 is 375. And again, the worst of it's over. Go back to this simple equation here, x plus y equals 40. If y is 25, what do you add to 25 to get 40? Well, 25 plus 15 would give me 40. So x is 15, y is 25. And that's pretty much the solution to the word problem.
Now, if you're ever in one of these word problems, especially the ones that deal with problems like amount of gallons, amount of rain, if you come up with a negative value, think about that logically for just a second, because that probably frustrates us more than anything. And this is what your foundation is here in word problems. No, they're not real problems you're going to use right now in the real world, but they are teaching you some logic. Right here in this last step where you divided by negative, if you would have written a negative 25 and then came up with an x value of, what would it be, 65?
Right.
Think about that. There's no way a rainstorm has negative rainfall associated with it. And that's where you have to start thinking now about word problems and logical conclusions to your answers.
Right. In other words, if the answers in both of these types of word problems, a negative answer doesn't make any sense. So if you get a negative answer, you must have made a mistake somewhere. Go back and check your work. All right. That was exhausting. I hope this is the end of this hot topic. It is.
It is the end of this hot topic.
All right. Where's this in the book, Jerry?
They will find it in Chapter 3, embedded in there with those word problems.
That's right. All right. We'll see you in the next hot topic. Take care.